Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and I want to start out today's video by thanking you. It really blows me away that you all stuck around despite me taking off the month of February to record an album of rock music. You can find a link to that project in the description down below, but I know you're not here to talk about music. You want to know if Spear Spewer is possibly Pauper Playable. We already have lots of pingers in the Pauper format, but Spear Spewer brings us up to our 8th copy of a 1-drop pinger. Being able to play a bunch of 1-drop pingers may help us get enough value out of them that they're better than just running another lightning bolt. For that reason, I want to try Spear Spewer out in Pinger Tribal. Before I get into the deck tech, I just want to let you know that you can like the video and subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Alright, let's get into Pinger Tribal. First, we have our new Ravnica Allegiances common that we're trying out. It's Spear Spewer. It costs 1 red mana for an 0/2 defender, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to each player. That means you take a damage as well. Because this is Pinger Tribal, we're running a bunch of other pingers as well, starting with Goblin Fireslinger, our other 1-drop pinger. It costs 1 red mana for a 1/1, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, although we'll never deal damage to a planeswalker with it. We're also running Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs, which costs 2 generic mana, is a defender, is an 0/4, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, but only if you control a desert or there is a desert card in your graveyard. Don't worry, we are running a couple deserts. We've also got 4 copies of Fireslinger, which is kind of unique because it can double as removal, just in case your opponent has some fairies or Battle Screech tokens. It costs 1 and a red for a 1/1, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to any target and 1 damage to yourself. Finally, we're running the most iconic pinger in the entirety of the Pauper format. This is Thermo Alchemist. It costs 1 and a red for an 0/3 defender, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, untap Thermo Alchemist. While we're not running as many instants and sorceries as Burn is, we can still get some extra value out of Thermo Alchemist every now and then. We're also running Curse of the Pierced Heart, which is kind of like a pinger, but it's not a creature, so it doesn't technically count. It costs 1 and a red for an Aura Curse. It enchants a player. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, Curse of the Pierced Heart deals 1 damage to that player or planeswalker that player controls. The rest of our deck plays out very similar to just a standard burn deck. Sometimes we don't have enough time to just continuously tap pingers to kill our opponents, so we've got burn to do that job. Our first burn spell is Searing Blaze, and it can kind of act as a utility spell, killing a creature as well. It costs red for an instant, and it deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker and 1 damage to target creature that player or that planeswalker controls. But if you put a land onto the battlefield that turn, you trigger its landfall ability, and it deals 3 damage to that player and that creature instead. We're also running 3 Fire Blasts, only 3 copies because we're running a few less mountains than Burn does. Fire Blast costs 4 red for an instant, but you can sacrifice 2 mountains rather than paying its mana cost. It deals 4 damage to any target. Next, we have our 1 mana 3 damage burn spells, which are crucial in closing out the game quickly enough. First, we have Chain Lightning. It costs 1 red mana for a sorcery and deals 3 damage to any target. Then, that player or that permanent's controller may pay red. If the player does, they may copy this spell and may choose new targets for that copy. You have to play carefully and wait until your opponent's tapped out of red mana before you Chain Lightning them, but for our next spell, that downside doesn't apply. It's Lightning Bolt. It's one of the favorite and most iconic cards in all of Magic's history for a reason. It's nice and eloquent, just 1 red mana to deal 3 damage to any target at instant speed. Finally, our last non-land card is Needle Drop, and it's very important to help our deck run consistently. It costs 1 red mana for an instant and deals 1 damage to any target that was dealt damage this turn. You draw a card. Alright, let's have a look at this mana base. First, we have 4 copies of Desert of the Fervent to trigger our Wall of Pharaohs. It enters the battlefield tapped. It can add red mana if it's untapped, and you can cycle it out of your hand for 1 and a red. We're also running Sunscorched Desert, which is a little risky, but we had to up the desert count for our Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. This helps our Needle Drop too. Finally, we have 10 basic mountains to make sure that we have an untapped red source on turn 1 to play our first 1-drop pinger. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have 4 copies of Gutshot for those decks like Elves, or if we have to knock a couple of fairies out of the sky and we don't have Fireslinger on board. We have 3 copies of Molten Rain to slow Tron down just enough to kill them. We have 4 copies of Smash to Smithereens to deal with Boros Monarch and Affinity's lands, and we have 4 copies of Electrickery for wrathing the board of all the X1s. And there you have it, Pinger Tribal featuring featuring Spear Spewer. We're going to take this deck into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Tuesday night playing Possibly Pauper Playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, we'll see you on Tuesday night.